Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, the Package Tourist, the magical mystery tour called life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight's guest is science fiction author John J. Sanders. John resides in Norman, Oklahoma, and has spent his life fulfilling a boyhood dream of riding dragons, living in spaceships, and battling aliens who commit injustices against innocent people while working and fighting alongside heroines and heroic people from the common weal by becoming a novelist. John J. Sanders has published 12 novels, many of which are trilogies, like the Gemini Sisters series, the T.I.I.C. War series, the Evolution series, and the Passage series. John has also published 6 books under the pseudonym John Sandwolf, the Riders of the Dream series. Tonight we will pay tribute to John's writing career. John, welcome to the show. It's a great honor and privilege to have you here. Let's start off by asking you, would you please tell our listeners about your latest book release? What is Riders of the Dream all about?
Riders of the Dream so I have a group in Discord, and we are just a group of writers. Some of us publish authors, like myself, and one of our people, someone from Romania, who uses a pen name Claude Lachat, wrote a short story, and the characters are essentially our Discord personas. I guess you could say our screen names and faces that we have on Discord. And he wrote a little short story. It was just something fun, and it was inspirational, and I fell into line and wrote my own short story, followed by a third member of our group, who also then wrote a little bit more than a short story. She actually wrote two short stories that go together. The first 3 stories were the first book, and it was just something we did for fun. And I said, hey, why don't we publish this? And so I went through the independent publishing process through Amazon and published our first book. And it was Riders of the Dream. And the way to describe the series, it's a pocket universe of multi-dimensional things we call octaves, where you travel from one octave to another. It has different kind of forms of physics and things like that in the dream. And the dream isn't made up of a vacuum of space, nor is it liquid. They refer to the puffy parts and the liquid parts as ether, and it has all sorts of strange physics to it. It's kind of, if you were to imagine, it has flavors of steampunk and Star Trek and cowboy space operas. So if you were to imagine Captain Nemo meets Captain Reynolds from The Firefly, that's kind of what it's like.
Okay.
It's just something we've had fun writing, and we have accumulated 6 books worth of publication.
Okay. Now, is this for an adult audience, or is it for kids?
Well, it's not really kid. It's not kid unfriendly, but it's not really kid friendly either. There is some adult content, mild adult content.
Oh, okay.
So it's not entirely kid friendly. I would say a teenager would be more than happy to read this and enjoy it quite pleasantly. And I don't want too many parents to be objective if their teenager read the books. And someone less than a teenager, I'd be kind of concerned.
Okay. John, I'm curious, how did you come up with the pseudonym John Sandwolf? How did that come about?
Since my last name is Sanders, Sandwolf actually is my first original Gmail account name when it was Sandwolf5. It still is. I have 3 boys and my wife, and each one of us has some letter designation in conjunction with Sandwolf, because I originally set up all their emails on Gmail. And the wolf part is just something that became attached to me as a thing. I have a wolf tattoo. I've always kind of thought myself for the longest time, and probably still am to some degree, a lone wolf. So the wolf just was part of me from I don't know how long. I probably at least since the Marine Corps, which have been mid-'80s.
Ooh, wow! So you served in the Corps then, correct?
Yes, sir. I was a Marine.
Oh, wow! Which division?
I was stationed on the West Coast. I was an Air Wing Marine.
Ooh.
I was a crew chief in helicopter for CH-46 helicopters in Tustin Air Base in California.
Wow.
And did one Westpac tour, several tours with the Coast Guard looking for drug runners, as well as we did a North Sea tour and some other different things. Most everything I spent was on the West Coast. So.
Wow. All right. Question, do you see yourself working with Claude Lachat and your other collaborators on future Riders of the Dream series? Do you see more coming down the road?
Yes, we have one. I have one book in the works. We have two new authors, or two new writers. Well, and book 5 was written by one of our newest authors, and we've got another author who recently started in our group, and so. And they both look like they're promising, and they're going to bring at least another book out at some point. And whether it's going to be a compilation or single author book, we'll see. Some of our stories have been getting longer as our character list gets bigger, and the world building part of the dream gets bigger. It seems like as we grow the actual story world, the stories become more complex and longer, which is interesting because Claude Lachat's first story was about 22,000 words. Mine was probably about 25K, and then our third member who lives in Kentucky, known as Kentuck, her two stories together was about 54K. So, and then after that, some of the stories started really growing in length. So,
okay.
It's been an interesting journey. We've tried to make it fun and kept it fun.
Okay. John, throughout all your books, not just the Riders of the Dream series, but your other works as well, how autobiographical are your characters? How much of you or other people have you ever injected into your stories?
I don't know that any one character has a lot of myself in it, or anyone I particularly know. I think a lot of the times it's some of the characters, depending on whether they're antagonist or protagonist or the type of character that's in between, tend to have qualities of all kinds of people that I've met throughout my life. If I were to say one character that has the most of my quality in it, it would be the character Lacey Gist, who is a forest ranger in the Sequoia National Forest in my first trilogy of the Evolution series, and she's kind of the mother of a lot of the other, characters, if you will, that come in the later stories. I'm somewhat very much a tree hugger. The Sequoia National Forest is one of my favorite places to visit. I'd absolutely, if I were to make my choice to live someplace other than where I am right now, I'd probably say that's where I want to live. To me, it's one of the most peaceful places on the earth, and I write about it several times in my book. So I think of all the characters, she probably has the most of me in that character. Okay. On the other hand, there's lots of favorite characters. My characters are all the characters come first in my stories. They usually get developed in my mind, in my dreams first, and then I create an arc for them to work in, and then the character writes the story.
Ooh, wow. Okay. Let's talk about your series of novels. Now, you said your Evolution series was like your first set. Okay, let's talk about that. Please tell our listeners, what is the Evolution series of novels all about?
So, a young man discovers he's somewhat of a nerd, a bookworm, and he's a lone kid, and he discovers some papers written by a gentleman called Baricelli, who was part of the Manhattan Project in World War II. And he was a mathematician, and he wrote these little programs on the very first computer that was used to calculate the required densities for nuclear fusion on the atomic bomb. And when off hours, he would put these programs into the machine and watch them evolve, essentially. And so he took the code that Baricelli wrote and stuck it into a more modern computer, and he wound up in an accident with his girlfriend who lived next door to him. And while he was in a coma, the computer, or the program inside the computer, evolved, and it became the digital character, first digital character I ever wrote about, which was learning artificial run alpha, which is Lara. And Lara, it's a story about her evolution from being essentially a program to a sentient intelligence to wanting to become, like her creator, human. And that was the first trilogy. It was, I don't know that it's really an original story per se, but it was my first attempt at novel writing because I read a series that truthfully I was disappointed in the author, and I said I could do a better job. Found that I really couldn't do a better job. It took a lot of practice. But it was a beginning of a journey that started, I guess, about 15 years ago now.
Okay. Now, what series came after that? Was it the Gemini Sisters series, or the Passage series, or the TIK War series? What came after the Evolution series?
So after the Evolution series, I started on what I thought was going to be children's novels. It didn't work out that way because apparently I don't have the skill set to write children's novels. But it was the Passage series.
Okay.
And the Passage series was focused around the offspring of two of the characters from the original trilogy. The thing is about what happened with the Passage series was, though, that as I began the first book, a character that was briefly mentioned in the trilogy, the first trilogy, a character named Nana, the character developed in my mind. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I didn't have the language to understand the things that I saw. And one of the things I saw when I was overseas on Westpac was human trafficking. And I didn't realize that. I didn't have a definition for it. But it had solidified in my subconscious, if you will, with Nana. And she was a victim of human trafficking that some of the characters in the first trilogy helped her get out of. And while I was starting the first book of the Passage series, I had intended to use her character a little bit in the story to as a modal device, to help the other main characters through their story. And I realized that she had a story that needed to be told. And so I wrote The Cage as a one-off in between the first trilogy and the second trilogy, because she's also part of that second trilogy. She's turned out to be somewhat of a major key character, as it turned out. Not taking away from the original cast of main characters, though. But it was an important story for me to tell because it's a human trafficking story. It's a very difficult story to read for readers. I'm not going to lie about that. It's got some really gruesome stuff in it. Very hard topics to talk about. But I had to write it. And it was probably the most emotional thing I've written. And I wrote it in a very short time. It's about 60K words. And I probably wrote it in less than 4 months from cover to cover, editing and everything.
Wow.
It was a drive that I couldn't stop. It was a train, in full motion. There was no brakes to it. And, I want to thank a psychologist friend of mine who helped me write it and edit it to try to get the emotions and the situation correct as to to bring Nana completely to life. She's my favorite character.
Okay.
Always will be.
In a sense, it was like catharsis?
Pardon?
Was it like a cathartic experience writing that? A release?
Yes, it was. I guess, like I said, I hadn't realized what I'd seen overseas because I didn't have the language or the dialogue or understanding of what human trafficking looked like and what it was and what it amounted to and the lives that it impacts. And it wasn't until I'd written this small little scene essentially in the first trilogy that it came out, and I went and did my research when I realized what I was seeing, I guess, in my mind, dreaming at night. And like I said, my psychologist friend, like I said, I went and talked to him about it, and he says, it sounds like you need to write a story. So I did.
Yeah. Okay, now after the Passage series, what was the next series? Gemini Sisters or the TIK War series?
The duet Gemini Sisters. Two twins born of separate mothers, it's kind of the Prince and the Pauper kind of story, if you will, because you've got one girl who's born into a sense of power and wealth, and with one mother, and then her twin sister is born of a kind of a generic, everyday American family, if you will. I mean, not totally, on the bottom end like the Pauper, the Prince and the Pauper, but it's similar. And then they come together by accident because the one that's the kind of the average normal American girl gets kidnapped by mistake because she looks like her twin that she doesn't even know.
Wow.
And so that's how the story goes. And so they wind up, they meet each other, if you will, and they wind up trying to rescue each other throughout the two books that I wrote, and it starts in San Francisco, and of all places, it ends in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
So, and it was a fun series to write, it was just something, and the characters are actually more important later in the last trilogy than they were introduced in the duet, and I really. They were great characters I had in my last trilogy, and the last trilogy is the Teak Wars, and it moves the entire story world of Lara into space. And at the end of the first trilogy, the two main characters, Dominic Marshall and Lara Marshall, it implies that they went to space. They took a spaceship from a Space Needle that was. And I'm not going to do any spoilers other than that.
Yeah.
And they left, and instead of coming back in a year or two like they expected, they just literally vanished. And so the other trilogy and the other duet all happened within a time frame that happened while they were absent from the story. Well, they came back in the last trilogy, they came back to Earth after 10 years of being away, and this story is their journey during that 10 years period and everything that follows afterwards.
Wow.
Which is that they discover another planet around Sirius A, similar to Earth, a little heavier, with a native population, and then they discover a new enemy, and they have to learn how to fight against this enemy because at some point it was a threat to them immediately when they showed up on the planet, but they also fell into helping defend the planet. And so the story evolves around that. So it has a bit of a space opera feel to it, especially the last two books. The first book is more upfront and personal in terms of battle and story and character development. But I use a lot of the characters that I developed in the first books that play roles later in the last trilogy.
Okay.
And that is a kind of a compilation of everything coming together.
All right. John, let's talk about you now. Where were you born and raised?
Well, I'm a military brat, so I'm a second-generation Marine. My dad was a Marine. He served in Vietnam 2 tours, and we spent a lot of places living in different areas. I was born in Syracuse, New York. Don't remember it. Have been there twice though, since I was an adult. Anyways, spent some time in North Carolina and South Carolina, but mostly I was raised in Southern California, around San Diego, Camp Pendleton, Fallbrook, California. Those are all kind of pretty close down on the south end of California. And then when my dad retired in 1976, we moved back to Oklahoma. And basically, I've been within about a 50-mile or 25-mile area of where I'm at right now since then, except for when I took my tour in the Marine Corps between 87 and 90.
Out of curiosity, when did your father do his 2 tours? I mean, I presume he was in Da Nang.
Well, let's see. He was overseas in Vietnam between 70. Let's see, we moved to California in 70. We moved to Oklahoma in 76. So California for at least 5 years. So he was in Vietnam between 68, I believe, to about 69 or 70. I want to say we moved to California in 70 or 71. I'm not positive on that, but thereabouts. So he was in 1st Tank Battalion, and not sure what part of the country he was in, but he was in the 1st Tank Battalion his first tour, and then he was in the rear doing administrative work for the 2nd tour, and then came home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Geez.
I mean, I remember the withdrawal from Vietnam in the early 70s.
Yeah.
When we were out in California.
I was just wondering. I mean, I was wondering, was he there when the Marines landed in '65? Was he at Khe Sanh? I was just kind of curious and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. John, where'd you go to school and later college? First your K through 12 and then later college. Where'd you go?
Well, so being a military brat, I went to Mary Faye Pendleton in Camp Pendleton, California, from 1st grade through, I think it was 5th or 4th grade. I went to Fallbrook, where I went to 5th and 6th, part of 6th grade, at Fallbrook Elementary, and then the rest was, I had middle school in Norman, Oklahoma, which would have been 6th through 8th grade, and then my parents moved out to the country south of where I live now, and went to a school called Washington High, which was a very small rural school, basically focused around football, which I had nothing to do with. I was a school photographer, so I had that was my interfacing with the school sports, was taking pictures of basketball, baseball, and track and football.
Okay.
So, and then when I graduated, the economy was pretty good in Oklahoma, and I went into being an electrician's apprentice, and I did that until the recession hit. When I guess it was right after Ronald Reagan was elected office, that the nation went into a state of recession, and in Oklahoma, everything pretty much stopped. It felt more like a depression than it did a recession.
Okay.
The work, so I wasn't able to work as an apprentice. I was working multiple jobs, and my mom suggested that she would pay for college, and so I went to enroll in college, and I wasn't mature enough. I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer. There's some irony in that. We'll talk about that. Okay. And then I was working multiple part-time jobs to try to make ends meet, and I finally got frustrated, and I said, I've had enough. I went and joined the Marine Corps. I took the NASBAF test, and I scored really high on it, so I got to choose my career. And I said, well, I want to fly in helicopters and work on planes. And that's what they did. They sent me to helicopter school, and I became a helicopter specialist for Boeing Vertol CH-46 helicopters. And
wow.
So I did in the Marine Corps. And then after the Marine Corps, I went ahead and went back to college. And I went to do an education degree, which didn't work out, and I wound up with a literary degree in American English and American and English literature, as well as a minor in anthropology, social anthropology. Ooh. So, but the irony is, what I do actually for a daytime profession is I am a integrations control field engineer, if you will, self-taught engineer. I deal with making big machines like steam boilers and power boilers and hot oil heaters, kilns, furnaces, anything that has a flame in it, run safely and do their jobs.
Wow. Okay. Oh, fantastic.
So that's my irony.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. I mean, now, how and when did you get involved in science fiction? Okay, why science fiction, John? When you're writing your novels, why did you choose that as opposed to other genres?
That's my dad's fault.
Oh, okay.
I read because I was pretty much a non-athletic child all my life. Fairly small individual. I had never been very strong. I mean, I played baseball, t-ball when I was a kid, and that was about the hardest sport I played. And I wasn't big enough to be a football player, wasn't tall enough to be a basketball player, and I couldn't run very fast, so I wasn't on track. So, but my dad read science fiction pretty prolifically. He had multiple subscriptions to books, magazines like Asimov and some of the other science fiction magazines. And when he was done with them, I picked them up and read them. I read Isaac Asimov. I read Robert Saberhagen, Paul Anderson, Robert Heinlein. Probably almost every single Robert Heinlein book that was ever written. Read some Philip K. Dick when I was younger, C.J. Cherry, and then one of my most favorite authors, probably that I read the most of, probably every single book she ever wrote, and that was Anne McCaffrey. And I was so taken with the female heroines in her stories, and I really absolutely fell in love the way that she wrote. She wrote character-based stories, not plot-based stories, and so it was her style of writing that I really fell in love with, and I think that's the driving force for my science fiction writing is that I do a lot of female characters that are heroines in my stories, that they're the lead, they're the obvious top lead character in the story, and they're the one driving force in almost all my stories. It's just, I do have some male characters and they're strong, but they're not the real storytellers. They're not the ones providing the entertainment and the morals and things that we learn.
Okay.
And probably, I just sitting there thinking about that, probably the reason I really like heroines is that my mother has always been an extremely strong influence in my life. I mean, I was probably one of the few males in my school in Oklahoma that knew how to sew and cook and do everything that a woman would do in the kitchen from the, masculine, or the what I'm looking for, the, male-dominated world.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned Paul Anderson. I was never one for science fiction, but I loved his Time Patrol stuff. Were you into his Time Patrol stuff? Because I've got the compendium plus that other book dealing with the Time Patrol. I wish you had done more about that. Were you into that or no, the Time Patrol?
I read several of the Time Patrols. I don't really remember them probably as well as I should. I probably remember more I probably remember Highland stuff than I do Paul Anderson. And I think I read, there were so many things I read over the years that some of them blend together. That the name Time Patrol sounds familiar. I imagine that my dad probably had paperbacks of those. I mean, at one time I had all his old paperbacks packed in boxes in my attic, and since we've gone digital, a lot of those have been replaced with digital copies from Amazon or from Barnes and Noble or something.
Okay. Now, John, are your books conventionally published or self-published?
Self-published. So I set up Sandwolf Ltd. As my self-publishing company for Amazon, and I was publishing. I have published through some of the other digital medias, but at this point I've actually pulled most of those books. And everything I have right now is currently on Amazon, although my plans is to go ahead and expand back out to some of the other digital media groups, such as Barnes & Noble, which is Nook Book, or whatever it's called, Kobo, and some Apple Books, and I think Google Books is still... I thought Google Books was going to collapse, but they didn't, so I may go ahead and re-energize my account with them.
Okay.
But I do offer paperbacks through Amazon.
Okay. John, last question. What is your next book project, and when can we expect its release? Besides Riders of the Dream, are you contemplating a new trilogy series?
Actually, I am. And I was thinking about starting a whole new story world, but I'm working on... I'm a lucid dreamer, and I've recently, in the last 6 months, been frequently dreaming about some new characters from the Tiak Wars trilogy, growing up and taking on their own adventures deeper into space. So it's going to be probably a space saga of sorts, probably a little bit of something between the space cowboys, if you will, and traditional, full-scale grand space opera. The cast of characters is not set, so I'm thinking the book's probably a year away at least. Because I'm actually also still working on another dream book. I'm not sure which one's going to take hold and attract my attention completely, but I expect one of the two of them is going to, the characters are going to say, nah, you got to tell my story first. So I can't really say, but I've had several changes in my life recently, one of which is my job, and so I'm getting ready to settle into a new career opportunity as the last part of my tenure of working. So once I get settled in, I expect to be able to get back into the saddle of writing every day, because my motto is write every day. And I have maintained that for about 15 plus years. I've only broken away from it on occasion due to illness or things I can't control. But I expect to get back into that routine where I'm writing several thousand words a day, and then hopefully I'll have a book out in less than a year. But we'll see how that works out. So I can't really promise a title at this point on either side, science fiction or the steampunk/science fiction.
All right. John, I want to thank you so much for appearing on my show, and I wish you the best of luck. And let me know when your next trilogy comes out. I want you on my show again, okay?
All right. Well, I sure do appreciate this opportunity, and thank you so much for taking this call with me.
And thank you for being on the show, as always. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for next week's show, where I will be interviewing author Walt Madigan. Thank you and good night.